Right now, at this exact moment, there are people living on the most isolated piece of inhabited land on the surface of this planet. Not the most remote place that ever had people. The most remote place that still does. Right now, today. To reach them, you fly first to Tahiti or New Zealand. That journey alone puts you further from home than most people travel in a lifetime. Then you board a cargo ship, not a cruise ship, not a ferry, a working cargo vessel, and you spend between 3 and 5 days at sea. No other islands appear, no landmarks, just the Pacific Ocean doing what it always does, which is being enormous, indifferent, and on certain nights, genuinely terrifying. When the island finally appears on the horizon, it rises out of the water like something that was not supposed to be there. Dark green cliffs, dense forest, a jagged volcanic outline against an empty sky. And then you realize you still cannot get ashore. The island has no harbor, no pier, no dock of any kind. To reach land, the islanders launch wooden boats through the surf at the only viable landing point. You climb down from the cargo ship into one of those boats, and they take you in through the waves. If the weather is bad, and it is frequently bad, nobody comes, nobody goes. The island simply closes. You can be sitting on a ship within sight of the cliffs and still be completely unable to reach the shore. The island is called Pitcairn. It is 2 miles long and 1 mile wide. It is administered by the British government from an office in Auckland, New Zealand, 5,000 kilometers away. The supply ship comes just 4 times a year. Between 40 and 50 people call it home. Every single one of them is descended from the same 9 men. 9 mutineers who burned their ship in this bay in January 1790 so that none of them could ever leave. This is the story of what they built and what they hid inside it for 230 years. On the 28th of April, 1789, somewhere in the South Pacific, a man named Fletcher Christian made a decision that would echo for more than 2 centuries. He was the acting lieutenant aboard HMS Bounty, a British naval vessel carrying breadfruit plants from Tahiti to the Caribbean. The mission was straightforward. The voyage was not. The crew had spent months in Tahiti, long enough to form attachments, long enough to build a version of a life that felt nothing like the discipline and hardship waiting for them on the open ocean. And their captain, William Bligh, was not a man who made the return to that discipline easy. He was a skilled navigator, one of the finest of his era. He was also a man with a sharp and unpredictable temper, prone to humiliating his officers in front of the crew in ways that left marks that did not fade. Christian led the mutiny in the early hours of the morning. Bligh was pulled from his cabin, bound, and set adrift in the ship's launch with 18 loyal crew members. That small, open boat, with minimal supplies and no guarantee of survival, was pushed out into the Pacific. William Bligh sailed it nearly 4,000 miles to safety. It is one of the great feats of navigation in the history of the sea, and it meant that the British Navy now knew exactly what had happened and exactly who was responsible. Fletcher Christian had committed mutiny. The penalty was death. He knew it. The mutineers sailed back to Tahiti, where 16 of the crew chose to stay and take their chances. Christian understood what that meant. Tahiti would be the first place the Navy looked. He needed somewhere else. Somewhere the charts did not show clearly. Somewhere the British would never think to search. He found Pitcairn Island, listed in an old chart with its coordinates recorded incorrectly, placing it miles from where it actually sat in the ocean. It was uninhabited, it was invisible. It was, for a man running from the most powerful navy on earth, perfect. In January 1790, the Bounty anchored off Pitcairn's coast. Christian's group included 9 mutineers, 6 Tahitian men, and 12 Tahitian women. They unloaded everything useful from the ship: tools, supplies, livestock, anything that could help them build a life on this rock. And then they burned the Bounty to the waterline. The smoke rose over the cliffs and drifted out over the Pacific. The ship was gone. The only way off the island was gone. There would be no rescue, no return, no second thoughts. Whatever happened next happened here. They had chosen this island, and now the island had chosen them back. What followed in the next 3 years is the part of the Pitcairn story that the movies left out. The Tahitian men had been brought to Pitcairn, but they were never treated as equals. The English mutineers claimed the land and the authority and left the Tahitian men with neither. Resentments built, slowly at first, then faster, as the shared urgency of survival gave way to the ordinary weight of days and years and a hierarchy no one had agreed to, but everyone was expected to accept. By 1793, those resentments became violence. The Tahitian men rose up. Several mutineers were killed. Retaliations followed. Counter-violence followed that. By the time the killing stopped, 13 of the original settlers were dead, including Fletcher Christian himself, murdered during the uprising. By the early 1800s, of the 9 mutineers who had landed on Pitcairn, only one was still alive. His name was John Adams. He was living on the island with 9 women and a collection of children who had been born there and had never known any other world. When an American whaling vessel stumbled across Pitcairn in 1808, the outside world discovered that the community still existed. Adams was eventually granted amnesty. The island became famous in the way that remote, unlikely places become famous when the story attached to them is extraordinary enough. Books were written, then came the films. The Mutiny on the Bounty entered the cultural imagination as a story of adventure and rebellion and the human desire for freedom. Pitcairn became the paradise those rebels had found, a place where the descendants of outlaws had built something peaceful and self-sufficient and strangely beautiful at the end of the world. That story was true. It was also, it turned out, profoundly incomplete. In 1999, a British police officer named Gail Cox arrived on Pitcairn for what was intended to be a routine community liaison posting. She was from Kent. She had no particular reason to expect what she found. Shortly after her arrival, a woman approached her quietly and told her that a young girl had come forward with a dark, deeply unsettling secret about what was happening behind closed doors. Cox began talking to people. The more people she talked to, the worse it became. What investigators eventually uncovered was a dark pattern of systemic misconduct and severe abuse of power that had been operating on Pitcairn for decades, possibly generations, involving victims who were far too young to protect themselves. This reality was not hidden in the way such things are usually hidden. According to testimony given during the investigation, it had been normalized. An Australian pastor who had lived on the island, told investigators he had raised his concerns with the community council and been told, bluntly, that their way of living on Pitcairn had always been different and that it did not hurt anyone. The investigation was called Operation Unique. It uncovered over 100 severe allegations involving 31 men. In 2004, 7 men were put on trial. The trial was held in Pitcairn's community hall, converted into a makeshift courtroom with judges flown in from New Zealand and victims testifying via video link from Auckland, because none of them still lived on the island. The defendants included the island's mayor, Steve Christian, a direct descendant of Fletcher Christian. His son Randy was also among the accused. The practical problem facing the court was one that had never arisen in quite this form before. Pitcairn's male population was so small that imprisoning a significant number of men simultaneously would threaten the island's basic functioning. The longboats that connected Pitcairn to supply ships required strong, experienced crew. The generators needed maintenance. The infrastructure of basic survival depended on the same men now standing trial. There were genuine discussions about whether sending the island's men to prison might amount to a collective punishment of everyone on Pitcairn, including those who had come forward. 6 of the 7 men were found guilty. The prison they served their time in was one they had helped build themselves, constructed specifically because Pitcairn had never previously had one. Steve Christian, the mayor convicted of multiple severe offenses against the community's youth, received 3 years. His son Randy received 6, the harshest sentence handed down. They appealed through every court available, up to the Privy Council in London. Every appeal failed. The story the world had been told about Pitcairn, the paradise built by rebels, the idyllic community at the end of the earth, had always been missing something. What it was missing was the question of what happens when a tiny group of people is left completely alone, beyond the reach of law or oversight or accountability, for long enough that their own norms become the only norms that exist. The answer, in Pitcairn's case, was not paradise. Isolation does not make people better. It makes whatever they already are harder to see from the outside. The trials changed Pitcairn in ways that are still being felt today. Some families left. The population, already small, shrank further. And yet, the island did not empty. The people who remain wake early. The Pacific light comes fast and bright, and the island's rhythms are built around it. Gardens need tending before the heat builds. Fishing is better at dawn and dusk. Every liter of diesel that powers the generators arrived by supply ship and costs money the community budget accounts for carefully. Power is used deliberately. Nothing is wasted, nothing is thrown away. Everything is repaired until it cannot be repaired. And then it is repaired again. There is no hospital on Pitcairn, no police station, no pharmacy with a pharmacist. Medical care is provided by a contract nurse, typically recruited from New Zealand, with serious cases requiring evacuation by ship. In a genuine emergency, a heart attack, a serious injury, the window between the onset of a crisis and access to real medical care is measured not in minutes, but in days. There is no dentist permanently on the island. A visiting dentist arrives occasionally. Between visits, the islanders manage. The single school serves whatever children happen to be living on Pitcairn at any given time. Class sizes have been as small as 1. The teacher teaches whatever age range the current student population represents, which might span a decade of school years in a single classroom. When the children reach secondary school age, they leave the island for New Zealand. Most of them do not come back. That is the detail that matters most for Pitcairn's future. The population has no natural mechanism for replacing itself. The young people leave for education. They find work, relationships, lives on the mainland. The island they grew up on. The only place in the world where their dialect is spoken, where their family history is embedded in every path and every stone, recedes into something they visit, if they visit at all. The language itself is called Pitcairn. It developed in the decades after the mutineers landed from the collision of 18th century English sailor speech and the Tahitian of the women who came with them. It has evolved in complete isolation ever since. It contains words and constructions that exist nowhere else on Earth. A way of speaking so specific to this island that it cannot be separated from the place that made it. Pitcairn is spoken by fewer people than attend a small school assembly. When the last Pitcairn speaker dies, the language dies with them. That is not a distant theoretical concern. It is a present one. And yet the community that remains has something that is difficult to name precisely, but impossible to miss. The people of Pitcairn can fix anything, grow almost anything, navigate seas that would defeat most experienced sailors. The skills required to live here are not one or two deep specializations. They are everything held simultaneously, passed down from parents to children the way the language is passed down, as something both practical and deeply personal. In February 2024, Starlink arrived on Pitcairn. For the first time in its history, the island has reliable broadband. The outside world came not by boat, but by satellite signal. After more than 2 centuries of isolation, that is still a genuinely recent development. The island is now quietly trying to attract people who work remotely. People who could, in theory, do their jobs from anywhere, including a volcanic rock in the South Pacific with 40 residents, no supermarket, and a supply ship that comes 4 times a year. Whether anyone will come is an open question. Whether it would be enough, even if they did, is another. In the cliffs and caves of Pitcairn, there are carvings. Ancient Polynesian markings cut into the rock centuries before Fletcher Christian was born, before the bounty existed, before any of the story the world knows began. Those people are gone. The island outlasted them and then forgot them, leaving only marks on stone that nobody now living can read. Their language is gone. Their names are gone. What remains is the rock they carved and the silence around it. The wreck of the bounty is still in the bay. 235 years on the ocean floor. Divers who make the journey can still see it. The anchor recovered and placed in Adamstown as a monument to the morning that started everything. The ship that was burned so that no one could leave is still down there, intact enough to find, slowly becoming part of the reef. The islanders today know what a shrinking population curve looks like. They have done the calculation. They know that 230 years of survival does not guarantee 231. They are not naive about what they are facing, and yet they stay. The ones who are there now, who were born there, or chose to move there, or came on a contract and found they could not quite bring themselves to leave, wake up every morning to the sound of the Pacific. They climb paths their great-grandparents carved into the hillside. They speak a language that exists nowhere else. They maintain a community that by any rational calculation should not still exist, and somehow does. Pitcairn Island is a place built on a crime, sustained by extraordinary resilience and damaged by a darkness that isolation allowed to grow unchecked for too long. It is not the paradise the films described. It is something more complicated and more honest than that. A real place, with a real community, carrying a real history that contains both remarkable courage and genuine horror in proportions that do not simplify neatly into either a love story or a cautionary tale. It is both. It has always been both. We have a